Welcome back to Teachable Moments with April podcast. I am your host, April. Welcome back to Teachable Moments with April podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that I've been seeing a lot of, little by little, gradually. Are people, individuals in the school system who are special needs, and their behavior within the school, primarily them attacking support staff, their teachers, and so forth and so on. And the other night I was watching some commentary from a fellow YouTuber who, that was the topic. He talked about a 17-year-old, and I forget what state it's in the school. I kind of was curious as I kept watching it as to how did they gain footage inside the school, who did it and who posted it, the information, the video itself, the video footage of this particular individual young man attacking. And I think it was over being disciplined, meaning most likely the teacher or the support staff telling him that it wasn't time for him to use. I think it was a game. I forget the name, what kind of game it was. You have to set boundaries and you have to set limits and you have to have rules. And he attacked her, and it didn't take a lot for him. He looked pretty, solid. He knocked her out. She was collapsed and laying on the floor. And then he proceeded to, further, inflict, blows, kicks to her. So the individual that I was watching his commentary, he gave his, his opinions, his take on it, and, I get where he was coming from. At the end of his particular video, he said some things that I found very interesting, and he was saying that he believed that this young man would benefit from being incarcerated, that may straighten him out. Now, I don't know, have they released or will they release what exactly is his diagnosis? What is his, is he autistic? Is he, so forth and so on. I don't really know. But his take was that would straighten the young man out. Now, I've talked about this before by myself as well as with Miss Mary. I used to work in the field of special education in one capacity or another. And I was a bit conflicted by what I was hearing. Also, I have two adult brothers. I had two adult brothers who are also considered a part of the population, the special education population, intellectually challenged. And when I think about them doing something and then being incarcerated, I have to, it disturbs me a little bit. So anyway, I decided to look up some information about this. Now, in the past, I've done a podcast in regard to episode for this podcast about people who are incarcerated, who are some intellectually and physically challenged, and how a lot of times the reason why they end up locked up is because they're looking for acceptance. They're somehow pushed or have peer pressure into doing certain things and not truly fully understanding that if they do this for this other individual, that they will end up in a lot of trouble. They may not understand fully. And then they end up locked up, and then just the horrific things that happen to them once they're inside. Now, there are people who are considered disabled, who are just been injured or something due to their health. There's a variety of reasons they become classified as disabled, not necessarily intellectually challenged. So I looked up two different things, and today I'm just going to talk about one particular source, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to focus more so on children who end up arrested in school and then from there, unfortunately, are incarcerated. All right, welcome back. So I found some information on a website called The Conversation. Okay, it was published in 2019, January 24th, and it looks like the person that published it was Chrissy Rogers, and she's a professor of sociology at the University of Bradford. The name of the article is "Too Many Children with Autism Are Let Down by Schools and End Up in Prison." For many young people, school can be a difficult place, and for some, it can just about be impossible. Negative experiences in school can have harmful long-term effects on pupils with autism on the spectrum, as a whole. Official figures show that children are increasingly being suspended or expelled from school because of behavioral problems, many of which include children on the autism spectrum. Some regions in the UK have experienced a 100% increase in these types of exclusions since 2011. So despite policy rhetoric on inclusive education, where children ought to be educated in mainstream schools, recent figures show school exclusions are increasing from 6,685 pupils to 7,720 pupils between 2015 and 2016 and 2016 and 2017. In my current research, I interviewed mothers of adult children with autism and other social, emotional, and mental health problems. They told me how their young sons had been a challenge in school, and how despite their requests for help, their sons received little support and ended up in the criminal justice system. Estimates suggest that 30% of prisoners have a learning difficulty or disability, and 60% have problems with communication. Though this is arguably a conservative estimate, as many inmates choose to hide the disabling condition. So now we're going to get into, as they say, the elephant in the room, no help or support, which is very prevalent, Mothers in my research talked to me about how their sons were different. They were violent to other children and teachers as well as their own families. All the mothers told me they felt something was not quite right with their child. And because the support was not forthcoming at school, this negative behavior escalated. And then as these boys got older, they ended up in prison. Oh my God. One mom, Sorcha, told me her son was made out to be the demon child of the school. He had his first exclusion in September 2004. So he was about 10 then. Another mom, Elaine, spoke of her son, Harry. He was a difficult child for school. He's disruptive and was getting into too much trouble. Andale explained how she had received a call from the headmistress to fetch her son after he assaulted a teacher. I went, and you better call the police then. Wow, he was 10. Failed by the system. But a lack of support was not just isolated to the families. One senior teacher who works in a special school explained how hard it is to help. She said that the combination of puberty and autism can make things very difficult. At the age of 14, there is so much going on for them. One boy got bad grades and didn't know what to do. He got involved with another pupil who had been excluded and was waving a knife. He got arrested. The mothers who spoke to me about their experiences of the criminal justice system, one of them is Trudy. Trudy explained how when her son was on remand, she felt squeezed from both sides. She said, My instincts were telling me that my son was getting worse and that we needed help, and the professionals were telling me he was fine. Another mother, Elaine, told me how she was totally broken. I just feel like I'm standing on the edge of the cliff and I don't know if I'm going to fall. It is very scary. The mothers in my research all spoke of the overwhelming challenges of dealing with their child's disability while moving through the bureaucracy and barriers. If the school and the criminal justice system in the school, it's supposed to be in, it says if, in the school and criminal justice systems. They spoke of a lack of support, a lack of access to professional help, and an overwhelming lack of understanding about their son's ability and the impact this had on their lives. Now, what I find interesting about this is the fact that if it's a place where if there's inclusion or whatever, the staff there, people should understand. But I know from experience in watching my mother and my family go through this, that this makes me sad that this hasn't improved. It's actually gotten worse. You would think there would be people that would understand. That's what they're getting paid for. That's what they get trained for. That's what they get education for. And still, we're at where we're at. That is very, very disheartening. The next area we're going to look at is the problem with education in this article. Under the current UK education system, where everything is based on grades and targets, there is little room for children who disrupt the smooth running of the school. These children are all too often excluded and made to feel that they are worthless. Oh my God, this is making me want to cry. As one teacher explained, one kid wanted to go back into mainstream school, but by the time he was 15, he realized this wasn't going to happen and he ended up in prison. I have a prediction. I think I'm seeing it. I'm seeing where this is going and them being featured in these newscasts and online media is that they fought for their rights for their children to be included into inclusion and schools being inclusive and programs being inclusive. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to take it back to the way it used to be. Because even in the commentary that this man, this individual, and I know that he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. I don't know the man. I just know he's on YouTube. Just based on his commentary and the things that he said, he doesn't know. He doesn't know, and he thinks that. And actual journalists, journalists on the news were saying that they need to be put somewhere else. Okay, like they need to be put somewhere else. Meaning they're going to start to isolate the people of the special education and special needs population to where they started. It's like it's going backwards. It's not going forward. It's going backwards. They're going to take them out of the school system and programs, and they're going to end up being like they were before. For as long as education focuses solely on academic achievement and continues to demand results rather than learning, children and their families will continue to be failed by the system. And as my research shows, once a criminal pathway is trodden, it is incredibly difficult to find a way out. This means that those who need support the most often end up incarcerated. Both Elaine and Underlay's sons, still now only in their 20s, were in special schools, and continue to be in and out of the criminal justice system. So even though they're in self-contained schools where everyone in the school has, some form of disability or a challenge intellectually or, intellectually, cognitively, physically challenged, they're still in and out of the criminal justice system. I interviewed Elaine 3 times and her son Harry once. Between her interviews, Harry returned to prison. Now in this last section, I'm going to read it to you. It says, rethinking learning. If more support Thank you. An intervention in the education system was to occur before the police got involved, then these young people would be less likely to end up incarcerated and at the bottom of a human hierarchy. But for this to happen, there needs to be a rethink of what education is actually about. Okay. Because it is clear that the restrictive and damaging nature of the current system doesn't work for some pupils. It's like it's not working for any of them, actually. If instead schools can help children to learn creatively and open up their minds to new possibilities outside of tests, and over there I guess they're talking about league tables in the UK, then it is likely that most children would stand a better chance of staying out of the criminal justice system and reaching their full potential. My final thoughts. Okay, guys, so based on this particular article and my personal experience meeting with my brothers, as well as professionally working in some capacity with the population in question, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what it is so far as meaning the solution to all of this, but I get where people are saying about something needs to be done, but I truly don't think that them being incarcerated or put in jail is going to help them, okay, in regards to rehabilitating them or somehow changing who they are, okay, because they actually can't help it. I'm not saying you're not supposed to discipline and set boundaries and have rules and so forth and so on. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that locking them up and putting them in jail, or they're in and out of the criminal justice system, is going to help them. Okay, it's not going to straighten them out. It's not. I think it's actually going to make it worse. And I think by them being locked up, there are a lot of them that not all of them, but there are some that are just not going to understand what exactly is going on. They cannot help it. I just didn't realize how bad this had gotten. I had no clue. I wish that when you work in certain settings, it's because this impacts the population itself. Where I worked, I never heard of anything like this. I don't know if the people that were higher up, that went to trainings and so forth and so on, and are they aware of this? Because I haven't heard this. I had to find out on my own. It wasn't provided through my job about things that directly impact adults as well as children who are special needs, okay, who are intellectually and cognitively challenged. That these are the pitfalls. The only thing that they ever really addressed was the fact of training, not exactly training them, but discussing with them. And it was very surface about, because I worked with adults in the end of my career of working in special education, if you will, is that if they are stopped by police, so this is another pitfall here, to not run, to get scared and run. Or a lot of them don't like to have social interactions sometimes. They're not easily to look into a person's eyes. These are social, nuances of giving eye contact and answering in a timely fashion. Sometimes their responses are delayed, and by that makes them very, very, very vulnerable for some really, really bad things to happen when they're put in a position to engage with police or any kind of law enforcement. That leaves them very, very vulnerable. You feel what I'm saying? So I had started a conversation about that. Like I said, it was touched on at my job, and then I took it a little bit further, just a little bit, because I felt like it impacted them, that they needed to know this is part of their daily living skills. They're adults. Things are going to happen. Okay, clearly things are happening, more so than I even knew, and I wanted them to be safe. And I wanted them, to the best of their ability, to understand, and I had started to find videos on YouTube. I do remember that. And they actually showed interest. They were requested. And then we would have a little discussion. And then the things that I felt like maybe they didn't process fully, I would try to brainstorm in how to kind of break it down and give it back to them to see, what they understood about it, to try to, because that's your job. That's why you're there. You're there to help them. You're there to facilitate them. You're there to guide them. You work together as a team. I never treated them in a certain manner. I mean, they had to say, I wanted to know how they felt. I wanted to know them. I wanted to connect with them. Everyone wants to have a voice. Everyone wants to feel they matter, and they do matter. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening to Teachable Moments with April. If you did enjoy this episode, I invite you to come right back to check out my podcast and my other episodes. Don't forget to listen, add us to your favorites, and support by clicking on the link in the description. As always, be blessed and be well. Until next time.